So, yeah, this is about like where do we link our metrics, where do we define our metrics, etc. And this morning I had a conversation with Emily, and we discussed that at least the definitions should be owned by, well, at least be at the place where you'd expect them based on like the organization of our company. So, for example, something is a recruiting metric, it should be on the recruiting page. Someplace. So we're in agreement about that. Now it's a question of, okay, where are the overviews? And for example, Emily just sent me a merge request that has one page that lists all our metrics. And I'm not necessarily against that. What I've been, thanks for linking that merge request, Emily. What I've been struggling with is I have the feeling that me and the data team are kind of working past each other to a large extent of the time. And a lot of time when I see something from the data team, it is not adding a single definition, but giving a new overview page or linking everything to a new location. But then all the links end in a dead link that just says to do. And that kind of how do you call that? Obfuscation? No, obfuscation.
Obfuscate.
Thank you. That what you can do now. That's not what Emily did in any way, because it clearly states when something is not there. But every time it's not actually adding the definition, and every time it's adding another source of truth. So for every, we want a single source of truth. And now I can imagine that for metrics, you both say, look, they have to be defined at the most relevant place, but we also have an overview of all our metrics. I can see that. But then what we're now getting is, okay, it needs to be defined there in the recruiting handbook. And we need an overview of all our KPIs, and we need an overview of all our metrics. Now you change a metric, you add a metric, it has to be added in 3 different places. I can tell you in advance how that will be, how well that will go. That will not go very well. It's pretty hard to add something to keep a single source of truth up to date. It's extremely hard to keep 2 sources of truth up to date. It's near impossible to keep 3 sources of truth up to date. So what I just left as a comment on Emily, her merge request was, hey, can we look at how we can at least deduplicate this with the KPI page, because a lot of them should be on a KPI page. Now, my KPI page is kind of a problem by itself because it's kind of one format. So should there be a KPI page for the whole company? I'm not 100% sure. Should we combine it with the OKRs page? Because that's what you were working on, Joe. I don't think so. I think in general, our pages tend to be too long. And we need definitions of like, hey, what is a KPI? Who changes it? Who's responsible? Who updates this page? And I think the KPI should kind of live on that page. Although I'm willing to say, hey, the KPIs for marketing go to this Periscope dashboard, and not have a single thing be on that page, but have it all be in the dashboard. I think that'd be an interesting thing to consider, because every source of truth makes things exponentially more difficult. So that's kind of the conversation I want to have. Like, let's see how we can remove as many sources of truth. At the same time, I think the more we can split out different concepts, the better. We can just use hyperlinks to cross-link them. Now, I've talked for a whole while. Joe, maybe you want to be the first one to respond.
Yeah, so what if like we created a new source of truth and removed previous ones? Because I feel like it's all over the handbook. There's 2,000 pages in the handbook. So if we just create a new one, it would be a lot easier for people to refer to that page and build within it and have assignees for that particular section so everyone can have ownership of it. And it helps the data team out too.
Yeah, so this is your proposal is create one metrics page for the entire company with all the definitions?
I guess so, and remove the older ones too.
Yeah, Emily and I discussed that this morning. I don't think that's a good direction. I think our conversation captures that pretty well.
Well, and I did look at it,
Oh,
and I
you
think
reviewed the conversation from this morning?
I did.
Awesome. Cool.
Uh,
Let's continue from there because I'm very happy to continue the conversation and change my mind.
yeah, so I think like when we previously had a single source of truth and like had a glossary of things, like nobody really had the initiative to add their own particular section, and there was just a bunch of information on it. But if we broke it out into sections and assigned people within that section of their department, they'll have ownership of that particular section, and I feel like there'll be more engagement. Kind of like for the team call, right? Like before, it was like hundreds of people on the team call, and there was not a lot of engagement. But if we broke it out into sections, engagement increased.
Yeah, so that certainly helps, huh? Defining it per department. But you know what part you own of the handbook? The part that says your department name. Like I don't own, as a sales department, I don't own the data team page. The data team owns that. So if you want to have people feel ownership of a certain metric, it should be there. Also, when somebody onboards to the company, where should they be aware of like how to find the apply to accept time? Where we describe our vacancy cycle. That's the relevant place. So instead of saying, hey, I onboard in recruiting at GitLab. And what I expect you to do is to go to the data team page and then look at the apply to accept metric. Then go to our operational excellence and quality page and then look at the process for the vacancy process. Then go to our courses page for our L&D person and go look at the courses relevant to you. Then go to our video team and look at all the videos that are relevant to you. Then I could drone on for a while, but hopefully you get the idea. That's not a good way to organize information by format. You don't want to organize it by format. You want to organize it by its relevancy. And that's kind of what team are you in and what's kind of expected out of that team. That should be our unit of organization, not the format. So I think although it's better to organize it per team, it's not where we should end up.
And I certainly walked away from the call this morning with the conclusion that the eGroup KPIs page is we identified it as an anti-pattern. The long-term solution is to move away from it. Right now, it's in place as we iterate away from it, but that it would not be a permanent part of the handbook.
Exactly. So I'm going to add it to the KPI page right now. So that is super clear to everyone. Let me share my screen while I do that.
I'll make a comment there, Sid, that defining a KPI in a dashboard makes for a lot of noise on the dashboard. Having a lot of text there can make it hard to get whatever you're trying to get out of the analysis.
Great. Let's not do that. Cool. Done. So that's a bad page as well. So I'm guilty, by the way. I also try to introduce a courses page, and I've fallen into this trap myself multiple times.
Just so like I understand clearly. So like let's say the sales team wants to add like the sales KPIs, like they're just going to go to their own section and build out a KPI section within. Okay, got it.
Exactly.
I'll take this opportunity, if it's okay, to address the specific comment on that MR that I've linked. The question was, what's the so I created a metrics definition page that links to, under the data team's umbrella, and it has the metric name, and it's going to link to wherever that metric lives in the handbook. There's one single source of truth, but think of this page as a bookmark to where the data team may go look for the definition, just to make it a little bit easier to surface. And like I said, it's under the data team. They are the owners of it. That's explicit on the page. The question was, what's the overlap between this and the metrics on the KPI page? My vision is that this would overtake the KPI page once we remove it, but I think we have a couple of steps to take as we clarify the definitions with the appropriate stakeholders. And once those definitions are in place and this page is, for lack of a better term, solid, then we can eliminate that e-group KPIs page. And hopefully at that time, we'll also have most, if not all of those KPIs on existing Periscope dashboards that can be linked from the appropriate pages within the functions.
Emily, how do you feel about on our KPIs page, say what is on there now per department is top KPIs, and then we have like an other KPI section for every department?
So instead of having this page under the data team, having this under the KPIs page?
Yep.
I do like the idea of this being under the data team because I would like the data team to explicitly own this.
Cool. How about moving the KPI page to the data team section so that the data team owns it?
I'm A-okay with that, and I can make it part of this MR.
Cool. That'd be great. So I spent a bit of time thinking about like the things that are on there now. So if you can keep that structure and then call them like top department KPIs or something like that, and you have a section other department KPIs, and then you can just throw anything you have left but that are not on the page now, and then move it out of the CEO section. Like basically every page in the CEO section is an anti-pattern because I'm not responsible for much. So let's move it. I'd be very glad for you to own it.
Okay, I'll take care of that. And I also added the data team as a code owner to that section of the handbook so that we're clearly saying this is our space.
Yep. And then in the future, we'll add a bot that makes sure that if someone breaks the link or changes the definition, that the data team gets informed or something like that. We're probably a year or two away from that. Emily, if for that, to make sure we're aligned, make one small change first, have me merge that to make sure we're aligned, and then do all the rest of the work because I don't want you to waste your time with us not being aligned. Okay.
Do you want that in a separate MR or this existing MR that I've assigned to you?
I think a separate MR because we're not going to create this MR as is. I'd make a separate MR to make sure.
Thank you.
Cool. Thank you. Joe, how are you feeling?
I'm good. I like the structure of things, but I am not completely clear of what everything's going to be structured like. So maybe we can kind of walk through the beginning, like how the data team is going to own the ownership of like adding the KPIs, and then like the sales team itself is going to add it. Like, I'm not sure.
So the KPI team or the KPI page will be owned by the data team. And for the sales, it will link to, for example, I don't know, average revenue per customer. That's going to be a link to the sales section of the handbook where that's going to be defined, including its goal. So ARPU is defined as this and the goal is that. And then the sales team changes that. And when they change that, they should get some approval from the data team. And they will not always do that. This will go wrong sometimes, but we'll get better at that over time. Because right now, the biggest thing is not the data team not being informed of changes. The biggest thing is that people don't own their own definitions, and there's not a great collaboration between the data team and the kind of the people who have the metrics. So that's the premier thing to solve. And by moving the definitions to the place where they're relevant, I hope that will improve things.
Got it. Okay.
An example that I uncovered as I was going through the operating metrics page today is that there are 0 people ops metrics on this page. So it's not that People Ops doesn't report a ton of metrics. It's just that I think exactly what Sid's saying, there was no ownership of this page outside of like the 3 or 4 people who regularly contributed to it. Other departments, other functions didn't feel a need. And putting the definition where people are working is going to make it easier for them to find the specifics behind the metric they're looking at.
Got it. So like I'm just wondering, like, how do we spark that ownership for each individual like department, right? Like what sparks that?
Yeah, the first thing is put it where they care about it. That's
Yeah.
the first thing. Because right now, I was looking at my KPI page. You were looking at the finance operating metric page, and the department was looking at the departmental page. And everyone was saying, "Yeah, well, the other team isn't doing much." So that's the first thing we got to get rid of. And then ownership is going to be hard. I see the data team. There's some collection side to it, but there's also kind of they're the coaches. You're going to talk about people like that definition. We need to tighten it up a bit. And then here's a proposal, and then have them merge it.
Well, I appreciate you hopping on the call and kind of walking through things with me. I'm going to continue to work on it, and hopefully it gets better day by day.
Cool. Yeah, I appreciate it too. Should we upload this or not? I'm fine either way.
I think it would be helpful to show the continuation of the conversation and link from it in that issue that I'm working on.
Cool. I'm going to ask Sherry to upload it. Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Emily.
Thanks for calling me in.
Can you guys hear me?